Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar covering an exciting piece of functionality released by Qlik last week called Application Automation. And as I said a few minutes ago, it's certainly got several of us excited. Hopefully we can show you exactly why that is. So our agenda today, like most of the monthly webinars, we're expecting this one to take around 30 minutes. But it does depend on how many questions you have at the end. As usual, it's fairly short agenda. I'm going to walk through a handful of slides positioning the software and explaining how to ask questions in the chat, and then we'll move on to the demonstration. Right, so on the call today, you've got myself, Neil Thorne. I'm Sector Manager at Ometis. And I said many of you will know Chris Lofthouse. He's our Head of Consulting, and he will take you through the demonstration later on. And Charanati, who again, a lot of you will know as your account manager. Charan will be helping us with the Q&A and also interrupting when a dullard like me forgets to start share the presentation. Right, housekeeping. So this session will be recorded and we will release it on our YouTube channel over the next few days. I'll send you all an email with a link to it. Do please join in. We welcome questions. Please ask them via the meeting chat function that's sort of highlighted below in the image there, and we'll interrupt the demo if we think they're relevant at that point. Otherwise, we'll keep them to the end, and Sharon will raise them on your behalf. During that Q&A, though, if you would prefer to ask the question yourself, then please do use the raise hand function. Excuse me. If you want us to, and we will unmute your microphone and allow you to ask the question yourselves. I know not everybody's quite as confident as doing that, but a few have done that on previous webinars. So this is all about Qlik's Active Intelligence strategy, and we're going to bring this slide up many times over the coming webinars. So Qlik's Active Intelligence strategy is designed to deliver what they call in-the-moment awareness of every aspect of your organization. So it creates the data analytics pipelines. It then delivers near real-time, up-to-date information, and that in turn will trigger immediate actions. And end-to-end, they call that active intelligence. Now, what we're showing you today is just a small part of the Qlik Data platform. You can see the Qlik Data Services elements of it. So these are things like the change data capture, used to be known as Attunity, compose and replicate, where it will automate the creation of data warehouses, data lakes, bring in that near real-time data. And then the analytics services, many of you, I'm imagining, are using Qlik Sense on this call or Qlik View. So this is all part of that whole platform. And the element that we're going to talk to you about today is a new part of it called Qlik Application Automation. And so, what is Qlik Application Automation? Well, it enables you to assemble processes and workflows using a drag and drop tool. So everything is visual. It connects into a broad range of the most popular SaaS applications on the market today. And there are, I believe there are around 30 at the moment, and there are plans to bring in many, many more over the coming months. It has native Qlik Cloud integration, which then in turn simplifies the APIs connectivity. So you don't need to necessarily get involved in all the gubbins within an API connector. It will do a lot of that for you. Dynamically automates triggers that activate process flows. That's a very wordy sentence, isn't it? What I mean by that is you can set triggers up so that if something happens in your organization, trigger a process that will let people know about it who can then actively do something about it and change the business. So that could be, I don't know, somebody has just sold something that is under the amount of margin percentage that we find acceptable. Okay, we'll trigger something that will then tell the right people so that potentially you could stop that order going out before it does. All of these automations that you create can be managed and monitored within a central place, which is the management console within the hub. So I've been asked to put together a few example use cases, and thank you very much to those. There's a handful of you who've been in touch talking about different ways that we think this could be used. Qlik task chaining, I'm actually going to leave that one to Chris because that forms part of his demonstration shortly. Application rollout. So, when you're creating new apps within a development environment, you want to move it into a test or a production space, you can use this software to do those elements for you. If you're taking a new user on board, there are all sorts of things that you have to do when onboarding somebody new to your organization. I've put some examples there. Add them into Teams or Slack, whatever you use. Add them into OneDrive, send them an invite into QlikSense, and perhaps add them into the QlikSense spaces that are appropriate for them. Backups was one that somebody sent in to us, where you can export the backup out to a OneDrive or a repository somewhere, an Amazon S3 space or something like that. Send a note via Teams or Slack that backup has completed, and perhaps add a line to a spreadsheet if you keep a register that way. All of those sorts of things can be done using this software. We started using it for our support tickets. So you guys will notify us of a new case by putting it into Zendesk, and that will then trigger a process that lets everybody know, the new support call has been logged. It actually puts it into our support Slack channel. It can go into Teams just as easily, or even into a CRM solution. And in fact, Chris is going to take you through an example of that latter one that I mentioned there, in that create leads. So every time, all of you that have registered for this webinar, we can automatically add you into our CRM solution, and a notification is sent saying, you have a new registration. Create an email task to go and follow that up, or however you work in your processes. So hopefully that gives you a bit of positioning as to where it is, where it fits. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to Chris Lofthouse, who will demonstrate the software for you.
Okay, so just to kind of recap then, so what I'm going to show you today is App Automation. So this is a new product to the Qlik Cloud Services platform. It is completely separate to QlikSense SaaS. So don't think it's just an add-on. It's not. It is a separate product, and it is available as an independent product to QlikSense as well. The first use case I'm going to show you is task chaining. So anyone who has got QlikSense SaaS will know that task chaining, or the capability, wasn't there a week ago. As of Tuesday last week, it did come into the product in the form of being able to use App Automations to facilitate that. So App Automations is effectively, for most people, the ability to automate processes between different cloud offerings, different cloud applications. And because most people on the call are going to have QlikSense in some form, we'll start with that. So in this example, what you can see here is I've just got some demo apps set up just for the purposes of the call. So here we've got two extract apps. These are completely independent to one another, and I effectively want to run these at the same time. So I'm going to kick both of these tasks off, and once they both finish, I then want to run my task, my user interface application. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and create our first automation. What you'll notice when you click on Add New in the top right hand corner here, we've got this new button that's become available, which is Automations. So we'll go ahead and create a new automation. and I'm going to give this a rather generic name and call it task chain. And you can give it a description and give it icons, but I'm just going to leave it with the basics there. So when you first go into the interface, and it's worth noting it is a visual no-code interface, so you don't need to know the APIs. You don't need to read up on any documentation, so to speak. All you need is your starting point. We've got our connectors on the left-hand side here. So as Neil alluded to, there are around about 30 plus connectors in there at the moment, but we should see that grow in the coming months and years. But we've got we've got our start task there. So here we've got different run modes. To start an automation, you can either go through, you can trigger it manually, as you'd expect. You've got your scheduled automation, so you can put this every hour, every day, and so on. You've got triggered, which allows you to call it from a third-party application. So, for example, Qlik Script or another web-based app. And you've got webhook, which will call it based on an event. And we'll touch on the webhook in the second demo that I'm going to show later today. So the first one is task chaining. So we're going to go into the Qlik Cloud Services connector. So as this obviously QlikSense SaaS is cloud-based, we've got all these API endpoints that we can call in the form of blocks. So the first block we're going to do is we're going to trigger a reload. So here I'm just going to filter down based on the do reload block. And here on the right hand side, we've got our properties. So within here, we've got our inputs, we've got our settings. So this basically says, what should we do if an error occurs? Should we ignore it? Should we highlight a warning? Or should we stop the automation from running? And we've also got history. History allows us to see the output from that block running historically, or if it hasn't run before, it'll give us this example output. So it allows us to interact and build further blocks based on this output without having to do several reloads in the process. To begin with, though, we're going to start with the inputs, and we're going to say we're going to pass it an app ID. Anything marked with this asterisk is mandatory, so we do need to pass in this app ID. Now, anyone that's familiar with QlikSense from a technical perspective will know that you can get the app ID from the browser address bar once you're in the app. But Qlik have added this nice feature where you can do a lookup and you can actually search for them. So I'm actually going to search for my first extract app, which is connecting to source A. And here we can set a run mode. So in this case, I'm going to set it to start the reload and continue, as opposed to wait for the reload to complete. And that's because both of my reloads that are extracting from the source systems are independent from one another, so they don't need to wait for the other to complete. So here we'll go ahead and we'll set this to be from source B. So now we've got two reloads that are going to happen. They're going to trigger simultaneously and run in parallel. And then the next thing we want to do is once both of these have completed, we then want to trigger off the UI. Now, before we can trigger the UI, we do need to wait for them to complete. So we're going to wait for the, or use the wait for reloads to complete block. And in here, you can see we need to pass in the reload IDs of the previous two outputs. So when we use each of these blocks and it triggers and it executes, it will return some sample JSON, which we can then reference in any subsequent blocks as well. So here you can see we've got the output from do block or do reload, so the first reload block there. And here we can take the ID, which is the reload ID from that block, and pass it into this one as a source of input. And then I'm just going to put in the comma as it says beneath, which is this is a comma separated list. And then we'll take the output of the reload ID from the second do reload. So now we've got two reloads happening concurrently, and then we're going to wait for them. Once they finish, we then want to start another reload, which is going to be for our UI. And we'll do another lookup here. Then we're going to trigger off our UI apps. Now it's worth noting what we can do here is add in some descriptions or some comments rather, and we can say which of these it is related to. So we'll just say this is related to extract A, and you can then see they appear underneath each of those blocks, just to make it a little bit more easy to consume, to read what each of these are doing. So now we've added those in. I'm just going to set the run mode, sorry, to wait for the reload to complete. And that's just because we've got the one UI apps there. We could do something a bit more complex, but we're just going to leave it as that. Now that has effectively brought task chaining to QlikSense SaaS. Now we've got two tasks running simultaneously, and then once they finish, it runs our user interface apps. Now we don't want to stop there. We want to show a bit more of the value add that App Automations offers to cloud services. So what we're actually going to do is we're then going to send an update to Microsoft Teams to say that this reload has finished. So now I'm going to connect to my Microsoft Teams connector, and in here I'm going to search for my send message block. And I'm going to select the teams that I want to output this to. So I'm going to do another lookup here. And here I'm going to connect to my pre-sales team. I'm going to select the channel ID, which is going to be the social one. And all that's left to do is just to pass in here a little message. So I'm going to say reloads completed. And then I'm just going to go ahead and save that. So on the left-hand side here, you can see we've got our Teams chats. And if I just go or knit back to the hub, you can see that these applications last ran 2 hours ago when I was preparing for this particular demo. And we'll go ahead and we'll trigger this run. When this runs, you'll be able to see the output per block. So we'll be once it finally finishes, we can see here that each of these blocks have executed. If we expand each of these, we can see the inputs, we can see the outputs of those. We can see any output if we added any there as well, any errors and so on. Equally, we could go ahead and we can further edit this further down the line. If I go back to the hub, you'll notice that these now have updated to in a few seconds. And I did notice just before this call, because I've got my Teams, if I just move, and this is a Teams issue, we can now see that the message reloads have completed with fresh data now appears there as well. So that's executed just under a minute ago. Now we could add onto this even more. So that's us output into Teams. What we'd also want to do typically is have some separate output based on whether the task successfully completed versus whether it failed or not. So what we're actually going to do here is do use some of the generic blocks here at the top. So one of those is the conditional output. So here we can say if the do reload, so the UI reload status is equal to succeeded. Make sure I got that right. So if that is succeeded, then it will send a message to Teams. And if it doesn't, we're just going to do a different one. We're just going to go over to Slack this time, and we're going to send a message there as well. So this time, if it fails, we're going to output to the general chat. I'm going to say app failed to reload. And this time we're going to add in the output from the error of the error message there as well. So we're just going to log the actual output itself, so people don't have to go to the reload log and understand what's happened. They can get that information directly from the chat. So now we're going to click on save here, and I'm going to run this again just to show that working. Or I would if it did. Always typical. Let's just check what that. Let's try and run that again. Always got to expect some issues on a demo. So there we can see that it's completed successfully again. What I'm actually going to do now is switch this over to be an app that I know will fail. So we can then have a look into Slack to see what the output is there as well. So here under the do reload, I'm just going to remove the application that we've referenced there. And I'm going to select an app that's now going to fail. So this time I'll just move my Slack onto the screen. So here you can see we've got a message related to the webinar there, and we'll click run. And what we should see is that message that an app has failed, and we've got the log script there of why it's failed. So here we've got an unknown statement saying failing this app on purpose, which is what I've put into that particular application, into the script to force it to fail. So there we've got a very basic app automation that does some task chaining, and the main users that this is targeted towards for this particular use case is going to be your ClickSense administrators or those that own those particular applications. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to move over and look at a different use case. So now we're going to look at one of the use cases that Neil referenced earlier, which is effectively every time somebody registers for an event. So in this case, we're using Eventbrite. So when they register for that event, it will get their details. It's going to create them as a lead within our CRM solution. So we use Dynamics 365. And it will take their first name, their last name, and email, and add them as a lead there. It's also interesting to note that we add some further details. So we add some custom information there in terms of next steps, in terms of the subject. So in this case, we're referencing the app automation, so that allows us to filter that data down. We then call a webhook. That effectively will trigger a automation in our production solution to then reload a ClickSense dashboard there as well. So we've kind of gone full circle in terms of getting the data into Qlik as well. And then finally, once we've done all that, we're then going to send a little message, a hero card to Microsoft Teams to get the team motivated there, to allow them to see who's registered, and allow people to automate that process. So all this is about streamlining the process and making it as efficient as possible. So earlier I touched on the run mode webhook. So this is triggered after an event that happens within a cloud-based application. So in this case, once someone hits that register button, it will trigger this automation automatically. So what I'm going to ask Neil and Sharon to do is put in the register URL into the webinar notes section, so then people on the call can actually see this in real time. And then what I'll also ask is for Andy to register, because I know he's got one waiting. So here you can see we've got, very good, Lucas Walker, who's now registered within this event. And if I just close this down here, we can then see the history of this. So you can see this, that happened 5 seconds ago. We've also added a couple of buttons here. So this allows people to automate some of the common questions that people ask, how many people have attended or who's attended, and this allows them to get those details there. So if I click on this link, what you should see is that it will then fire back a whole list of everyone that's currently registered for this particular event within our solution. Now, it's worth mentioning we haven't just automated the process of adding the detail into our CRM solution. We've also automated the process of answering a couple of commonly asked questions that take time for people to manually do. If I go over to my lead CRM, so if you notice that we added Lucas Walker here and Hugh G, and we go to our CRM solution here, and I'll just make this full screen. Just give that time to load. You can see these have now been added into their as a lead. You can see our next steps that have been added as part of that. We can see the created on and time. For some reason, that's an hour behind. And then if we go to our QlikSense dashboard, which would have triggered a reload at the same time, we should also see them appear within our dashboard there as well. So there you can see Hugh G, PowerPoint sharing experts. Very good. I'm guessing that's Neil Thorne. And Lucas Walker that's just done that. So you can see all these happening in real time and automating those processes. See if anybody else is added. No. So that's App Automations. I hope that's been useful. Are there any questions from anybody?
The first question I do have is whether it would be possible to use App Automation to actually move applications from, let's say, for example, a development environment into a test environment and then into production. Is that something that's possible?
So yeah, you can absolutely move apps between spaces if that's what they're alluding to there. So just remember that this is for QlikSense SaaS, or QlikSense Cloud Services. It's not something that you could deploy between on-premise and SaaS. This is SaaS specific.
Okay.
Okay, fab. We do have a question from Richard. Is it available anytime on QlikSense Enterprise? OW, Neil, what does OW stand for?
QlikSense Enterprise on Windows.
On
so
Windows,
so
thank you.
that's what Chris just answered there, really. So no, it's not going to be on premise, as we would call it.
Yeah.
That's all right, Richard. I'm always asking the guys what different acronyms mean. So please don't apologize. Another question we do have actually, Neil, this might be for you, is whether this is a paid for service or whether it's part of SaaS, because we know that the SaaS offering is quite generous at the moment.
Okay, so yes, you get forgive me, I've made a note of this and I now can't find it. Let me think. You get so many, Chris, what's the term that it's called when
5,000 runs?
Runs, thank you, yes. So you get 5,000, it is a separate paid for item, but you get 5,000 runs per month included within that. Now, we've had a number of chats with Qlik about this, and I suspect this is so new that some of that pricing will change over time, but that's what it is at the moment.
Fab. All right, thank you for answering that question for us. We have another question here as well. A customer of ours uses Monday.com. Is there a connector to help with the integration to Monday.com? Chris, I think that might be for you.
Ooh, interesting one.
Can't remember actually. There is.
Can't see a connector for Monday.com at the moment. So I'm going to say no for now.
It was, so I mean, this product came from the Blender acquisition, didn't it? And I know that they certainly had a Monday.com connector, so I'm assuming that will come over time. That's perhaps a big assumption on my part, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and we can always feed back to Qlik as well. So they're very open and proactive on this, on any feedback we give them as well. So if there's something that people are, after and they want to use app automations, that they could prioritize that as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I've just got one more question. So if anybody else has got anything that they would like to contribute as well, please put them in the chat or raise your hand and we can let you into the conversation in a little bit more detail as well. The final question that I do have at the moment is that we don't technically use QlikSense fully yet as a customer. Are we able to use app automation without having to have QlikSense in place?
Ooh.
If you've got a SaaS tenant, then you will have access to app automation. So yes, you could use app automations even if you don't make use of the QlikSense tenant in its own right. Equally, it is a separate product, so you could buy it separately as well.
I think I'm right in saying, Chris, don't you get a number of professional users if you buy the product anyway? You get a number of professional ClickSense users on SaaS. If you're not an existing...
If you're not an existing Qlik customer, yes.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the messaging that we're trying to get across, I think, here, isn't it? It's not necessarily to do with ClickSense. You could potentially use this for, moving, creating workflows anywhere. It just happens to sit on the ClickSense, on the Qlik Cloud infrastructure. But I think I'm right in saying, Chris, you could use it for pretty much anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what we've got most excited about, is that the limitations on it are probably people's imagination. That sounds a bit trite, but I think I'm pretty quite correct in that.
Yep.
Any other questions? So yeah, I'm tempted to put Richard on the speaker actually, so he doesn't try and use any clever things again. But if anybody has any questions that come up after we close this webinar down, please just drop us an email, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So drop it to info@ometis.co.uk if you don't know our personal emails. I'm going to be sending the slides out once we've got a link into the YouTube. Once we've got the video uploaded to YouTube, I'll send another email out that will have that link and the slides, should you want to go through them slightly slower pace to follow some of the items through. I'll also put on that next webinar, which from memory I think is the 19th of October. Is that right, Sharon?
18th of November.
18th of November.
Yeah.
Where did I get 19th of October from? I don't know.
It's my dad's birthday, so I remember that day.
Oh, okay. Well, many happy returns to him. But yeah, I'll also send out a link on that one. It will be, I think it's retail focused, the next one. But that's not to say that people can't come along and understand how one of our customers, Pizza Express, is using the software and the sort of things they're using it for, because they will cross industries, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I've just popped the link to the next registration
you.
page in the chat as well, and I'll be adding some more details to that page, so you've got some more information.
Brilliant. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much all for joining us. If nobody has any more questions, we shall see you later on the 18th of November. And like I say, get in touch if you would like us to cover any other topics as well. We're always looking for new subject matter, and that could be going over old ones, of course, if you want us to repeat some. So just let us know and we'll do what we can to help. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everyone.